Originally opening in early 1929, Phoenix's Orpheum Theatre quickly established itself as a go-to stop between Los Angeles and Denver for traveling vaudeville shows on the popular Orpheum circuit. The stage was 101 feet wide and 28 feet deep, which made it capable of handling the traveling and weekly changing vaudeville shows, which wasn't always the case with a lot of theaters in the 1920s and 30s. Built and designed in a Spanish Revival style of Spanish Baroque architecture, the Orpheum Theatre's interior was filled with murals and molding, with paintings of mountains and forests, and even clouds across its domed ceiling. The intent was to make its patrons feel as if they were watching their entertainment al fresco, or in the beautiful outdoors. By the end of 1929, the Orpheum was sold, and it became part of the Paramount Pictures chain, and continued to operate for the next few decades, its name changing to the Paramount in 1950. In the 1960s, it was purchased by the Nederlander organization, an operator of live theaters and music venues. In the 70s and 80s, the theater was leased to the Corona family, a local Mexican family who used the building to host Hispanic events and films. At some point in all of this, the decorations and flourishes were hidden, and some even painted over in black as not to supposedly distract the audience from the films. In 1984, the city of Phoenix purchased the property, and after a 12-year restoration project, the Orpheum was reopened with its original name. The theater once again boasts murals and paintings, and even now has a projection of moving clouds splashed across its ceiling. In 1993, the Friends of the Orpheum Theatre was established as a volunteer organization to provide educational and fundraising support for the theater. While the Orpheum seems to be primarily a live music or comedy venue these days, the Friends of the Orpheum Theatre, or FOTOT, still show films to support the Orpheum, and on October 13th, 2024, the 1920 film Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was shown with a live performance by the Mysterium Quartet. My wife Beth and I attended that performance. My name is Derek M. Cook, and this is The Bride of Monster Kid Radio. The song is Gin and Hydrotonics. It's from the band The Hydrotonics. They're a surf band based out of Guelph, Ontario, and you can hear them on this week's episode of the podcast because they gave us permission to play their music here on the show. Please make sure you check them out over on their Bandcamp page. It's thehydrotonics.bandcamp.com. Welcome to the podcast, episode 2 of Bride of Monster Kid Radio. I'm your writer, host, producer, Derek M. Cook. Welcome to the show. Thrilled to have you here, and I'm excited because we've got the return of Kenny and his look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. As I said last week, he may be dialing back a little bit in terms of his involvement with the show, but you know what? He's got an awesome segment this week, and I'm excited to share it with you because it's about Dr. Jekyll, or Jekyll, and Mr. Hyde, which is the theme of this week's episode. Beth and I had a chance to go see that movie at the Orpheum Theatre here in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about our experience going to the Orpheum. We're going to talk about the movie. Kenny's got his segment, and of course, it wouldn't be an episode of Monster Kid Radio without Mark Matzke's segment, his Beta Capsule review, where he's still talking about all things Ultraman. So that's coming up in this week's episode of the show. As I mentioned last week, we are currently running a contest right now because Bride of Monster Kid Radio needs some new artwork. If you're an artist of any kind, digital art, hand-drawn art, heck, I'll take finger painting, it doesn't really matter. If you have something that you think would work for the Bride of Monster Kid Radio, for logos, for business cards, for maybe a redesign of the website, I would love to take a look at it, and I'm going to give you a prize. You will be compensated with a Monster Kid Radio gift pack. Yes, I got rid of a lot of things before I moved down here to Phoenix, but there are still a few boxes in storage right now labeled Monster Kid Radio giveaways. There's books, DVDs, other movies, other sorts of awesome monster goodness I'd love to put together in a prize pack for an artist that submits an awesome bit of artwork that we can use here on the show. And of course, you're going to get credit, and we're going to make sure people can find you. We'll provide links to whatever website you need us to provide links to, whatever. Just make sure you get your entry for this contest to us by my birthday on December 11th. Email me at monsterkidradio@gmail.com. Something else is happening on my birthday on December 11th, but you're just going to have to stay tuned to the show to find out what that is, because Beth and I are going to talk about it when we talk about Dr. Jekyll, or Jekyll, and Mr. Hyde, but that's happening after Kenny, after Mark, right after this.
Daughter of Dr. Jekyll, yearning for love and discovering on the eve of her marriage the monstrous inheritance that was her birthright of fear.
Oh, I still shudder when I recall that face, like some perverted mask of evil out of a legend of horror.
Then you saw him as Hyde?
Once, at the very last, just before the mob caught him. They almost tore him to pieces. The villagers broke into this tomb and drove a stake through his heart.
Daughter of Dr. Jekyll, terrified that she become the disfigured thing that was her father, a vampire drawing sustenance from bestiality.
I've got to get a stake and drive it through my heart and bury me beside my father. Well, do it! Do I have to kill myself? If you love me, please kill me!
Have something to share with Bride of Monster Kid Radio? You can email the show at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave a voicemail at 360-524-2484.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Ultraman Ace, Episode 17, Summer Horror Series, Scary Story, The Demon Woman of Hotaru. A grisly series of traffic accidents warrants an investigation by TAC because the victims in each case are reduced to skeletons. At the same time, work on a powerful anti-terrible monster weapon is completed, and in order for it to be transported to TAC headquarters, it must pass through Hotaru, the very location where the fatal crashes keep happening. Hokuto and Minami decide to scope out the proposed route in the dark of night, only to encounter a ghostly apparition that seems to be connected to a wheelchair-bound girl. Minami befriends her while also suspecting the youngster is the key to the mystery, a theory which is put to the test with the appearance of monster-sized firefly, Hotarunga. The 17th installment of Ultraman Ace, which premiered July 28, 1972, is worthy of its title. While not intensely scary by today's standards, a creepy atmosphere is established from the opening scene, and many of the sequences take place at night, including Ace's duel with the Yapul's kaiju lightning bug Hotarunga. Both the monster and the lonely road in this story carry the name Hotaru, which translates as firefly, and firefly imagery permeates this episode. In fact, the luminescent insect holds a special place in Japanese culture, whose emergence each summer is a special occasion. In stories and song, the firefly connotes passionate love and the spiritual acceptance of change, as symbolized by the passing seasons, ideas that find expression under the watchful eye of the terrible monster attacking crew and Ultraman Ace. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
Buried alive in each man is a strange, depraved creature that turns the soul into a battleground of sin and violence, turning life into an inferno. In Dr. Henry Jekyll was this knowledge. Perhaps it was his quiet ways, his unloving wife, his simple, homely face that drove him to unleash this inner presence. This was Jekyll's inferno. Dr. Jekyll gave life to the unspeakable evil of Mr. Hyde. Rich, handsome, decadent Mr. Hyde erupted to spew adultery, viciousness, murder in the greatest macabre spectacle of all time. American International Pictures presents a fascinating new Dr. Jekyll, a terrifying new Mr. Hyde. Robert Louis Stevenson's study in terrifying evil. Jekyll's Inferno. In color and megascope.
Because we're doing Jekyll and Hyde, or Jekyll and Hyde, this week on the show, I thought we'd keep the Jekyll or Jekyll and Hyde love going over on the Twitch stream. Go to twitch.tv/MonsterKidRadio because this Saturday, December 7th, we're going to be doing nothing but showing Dr. Jekyll and Hyde movies. All sorts of cool Dr. Jekyll, whatever and Hyde stuff is going to be playing on the Twitch stream on December 7th, starting at 12 o'clock noon Mountain Time. Twitch.tv/MonsterKidRadio, December 7th, Saturday, noon Mountain Time.
Hello there, Monster Kid Radio heads. This is Kenny with a look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. Today we are talking about the 1920 John Barrymore version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. For today's segment, we will learn a little bit about the history of this Robert Louis Stevenson story on the screen. The most famous of the silent versions featured today was not the first version. Let's take a look at an earlier version from 1912, featured in FM 25 from October of 1963. The brief article mentions two photos Derek and I will post on the internet. In issue 23, we were the first film monster zine to show you the face and figure of Frankenstein 1910. Although its footprints have been on the sands of time for nearly half a century, we've learned of another film based on Frankenstein made around the time of World War I, and the keenly developed senses of both Doc Savage and Tarzan, aided by expert researchers like Walt Lee, Chris Collier, and Dan Levitt, have been called into service to help track down further info on this elusive production. Thanks to a mysterious benefactor who prefers to remain anonymous behind the nom de plume of Roman soldier, we know the title, 3 provocative words, but won't be revealing further info till we have the exclusive scoop for you. In the meantime, another coup. Herewith, first film monster zine photo from the Tannhauser studio production in 1912 of Stevenson's immortal science horror story. In the words of the co-star, Harry Benham, pictured on this page, the picture was a one-reeler made in New Rochelle, New York. James Cruise played Dr. Jekyll. His wife, Marguerite Snow, was the leading lady, and Cruise and I took turns playing the villainous Mr. Hyde. The picture was directed by Lucius Henderson. As Cruise and I were the same size, we could wear the same clothes and wig, but we did not use the same false teeth. We had separate sets, which we kept attached with the same powdered mastic that denture wearers use today. What I remember most about the making of the picture is that we were constantly changing clothes after about every scene. In those days, pictures were turned out like a butcher grinds out sausage. Sometimes it took only 3 days to turn out a one-reeler, but this one was slower because of the delays in changing the characters, so it lasted over a week of filming, much to Tannhauser's chagrin. Later, at the same studio, Benham made a 2-reeler, in which he played 9 parts. Called Harry's Waterloo, the film employed double, triple, even quadruple exposures, so that he could appear on the screen in all 9 character roles, both male and female, at the same time. It took nearly a month to shoot and gave Tannhauser a whole raft of ulcers. Then, until 1922, he worked for most of the leading film companies of the day. He is a friend of Claude Rains, with whom he acted on the stage. FM salutes a silent star. This was the caption below a photo of Harry Benham from 1963. Mr. Hyde today, not behind bars, as the background suggests, but outside the White House lawn. Mr. Benham was 80 years old on February 26, 1963. We at FM congratulate him, wish him many more happy years of life, and thank his friend Clark Wilkinson for providing us with this fascinating excursion along the lost road to yesterday. In FM 34, from August of 1965, Uncle Forey presented a history of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde on stage and screen. Here is a look at the section from the first film till today's featured version. In 1908, for the first time that we have record of, the famous horror story was recorded on film. It was a silent short made in the USA. 2 years later, the Danes made another version, short and of course still silent. A complete history of the Jekyll and Hyde pictures appears at the end of this article, so we won't list them all here. Suffice it to say that, in 1920, it was simultaneously filmed in both Germany and America. The foreign version was called Der Januskopf, or Janus-faced, meaning double-faced, as Janus was a mythical god of the Romans, who believed that he had a face on the back of his head as well as a front. The Jekyll Hyde character in this production was played by Conrad Veidt, already famous for his characterization as the sleepwalking kidnapper and killer in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and a young actor from Transylvania, who had previously frightened audiences in The Necklace of Death. Oh yes, his name was Bela Lugosi. The American version starred the great profile, the man who, when photographed from left or right, was incredibly handsome, John Barrymore. The fact that he was so good-looking made his transformation all the more terrifying when he assumed the personality of the vile Mr. Hyde. However, although Barrymore did employ a certain amount of makeup, building up his head to a balding pyramid-like peak, darkening his skin and lengthening his fingers, he accomplished the major portion of the transformation from good self to bad by the power of his acting alone. By today's standards, when seen revived on TV on a program like Silence, Please, the Barrymore performance sometimes strikes a note of humor in some viewers as he seems to hop about the screen like a frog on a hot tin skillet, but his skill was sufficient unto the day to turn spectators of the 20s gray with fear and trembling. That is all for this week's look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. We will have more next time. For MKR, this is Kenny saying adios.
Sweeps London from end to end. Even Scotland Yard is baffled. But two men of intrepid daring fight back. It's Abbott and Costello at their hilarious best. Battling fiction's most fearsome themes in Bud Abbott and Lou Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Co-starring Boris Karloff as Robert Louis Stevenson's fabulous double demon.
Mr. Hyde will kill him. Mr. Hyde will kill him.
With Helen Westcott, Craig Stevens, and Reginald Denny.
Hey, stop this fight! There's ladies present!
Bud and Lou are tearing up the town, trapping the beast among a bevy of beauties, adding turmoil to terror in a house of horrors that would frighten even Frankenstein.
Come on, will you? We can catch your monster! Give me a hand!
And what a riot when they get funny notions from deadly potions.
Hey, Slim.
What?
Those guys must be seeing things.
Pay no attention to them, they're drunk. You know, there's always a way of... Sticky!
What did this
we were really excited to make one of the very first monster kid movie things that we've done here in Arizona, a screening of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, from 1920. So it was a silent film. And it was, I think, a great way to kind of kick things off for us.
Yeah, it was definitely one I've never seen before. I love some of the old silent films. It's really neat to take a look back at that era and see what was going on in film. And as they, nearly every movie, they were trying new things out. So as they tried new things out, you got more and more innovation. And this movie's no exception.
It was very cool to see it this way. And with this movie, it's something that I also realized I'd never seen. To my shock, to my horror, I'd never seen this particular version of Jekyll and Hyde. I'm just going to say Jekyll. I know I've had listeners say Jekyll, but it just, in my brain, it's Jekyll. Plus, it was a silent film, so really, it's pronounced
however you would pronounce it in your head. Yeah.
See, I was just going to leave a bit of silence there because it was a silent film, but okay.
No dead air.
No dead air. Okay.
Only dead creatures. No dead air.
Oh, no dead creatures in this. No dead creatures in this. So,
well, not at the beginning.
Well, that's true. That's true. We do have some murders happen. And like you said, it's really cool to see these silent films, especially when you think about where they were technology-wise, what they were trying to do, what they were attempting to do with film, that sort of thing. I love seeing how history is portrayed through Hollywood. And like you said, it's really cool to see where they were technology-wise with film. I love the history of Hollywood, especially early Hollywood. It's something that I'm fascinated by. I read books about it. I listen to books on audio about it. I enjoy reading and learning about it. And so to see what the films actually were, it's just really neat.
Well, and for me, coming from the theater background, I really love the era of the 20s and the 30s because we see a lot of stars of stage switch over and become stars of the screen. Now, not everybody was able to make that jump, sadly, but for those like the Barrymores, which John Barrymore here, they were very, very successful. So successful, in fact, that their descendants are still on TV hosting talk shows today.
Right. Yeah. The Barrymore family is legendary, right?
They are, yes.
Yeah. I mean, you go all the way back to John Barrymore, and theatrically, yeah, he did a lot of work on stage too. I mean, a lot of the Barrymores did a lot of work on stage. And to have that, again, that legacy going all the way back to the early days of Hollywood, how cool is that?
It really is. I had worked at one point when on my theater company, I had been the dramaturg, ending with a G, not a D for all you giggling, for a show called I Hate Hamlet.
Okay.
And in the show, it's about this TV actor who is taking a break from TV to go on the stage in New York City, and he's going to play Hamlet. And basically, he's gotten the part because he's a famous TV star. And to get him in the mood, he rents the former apartment of John Barrymore, where John Barrymore lived when he played Hamlet at the same theater in New York. Well, lo and behold, some friends come over, they hold a little seance as a joke, and they summon the ghost of John Barrymore, who then follows this actor through the next several weeks and months of preparation to become Hamlet. And he's full on stage in the tights and, the full stage makeup, everything. And so I had to go and learn quite a bit about John Barrymore to fulfill my role. A dramaturg is someone who does background research and helps inform and teach the cast and the crew of a show about the background of the characters in the show, if it's historical in nature, about the time period that the show's set in, so that things like costumes and props are accurate, but also very much about the people involved. And in this case, John Barrymore being a real life person, I was able to find quite a bit. So it's fascinating to see him in this role and be able to connect so much of what he did on the stage, being this bigger than life character, and see him carry that over onto film.
I've always wondered what a dramaturg does, so that's interesting. I didn't know that you did that.
They do all of the in-depth research, and they make sure people don't carry a cell phone onto a 1960s set or whatever.
That's cool. I want that job. That sounds fun. because I'm a huge nerd.
No anachronisms allowed.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And it's interesting too when you think about it, when you do the research, a lot of actors and actresses were reluctant to start slumming it in the movies because that wasn't real acting.
Well, and at first it didn't actually pay that well.
Yeah.
They were like, what, I get paid once and then you get to show it everywhere? Whereas in the theater, you got paid every night that you went on to perform. And they were real reluctant to get involved in this kind of lower art, remembering that movies were cheap back then.
Yeah.
You're paying a nickel or a dime to get into the movies, not $22.50 like now at some places.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, at what prices were, and the fact that the studios were new, I mean, Hollywood wasn't even really Hollywood yet at this point in the 20s. They were still growing. There is no Las Vegas yet, I don't think.
Right.
So it's a different era, and you have to look at it like John Barrymore is kind of going out on a limb here and taking a leap of faith, putting himself in a leading role, 2 leading roles, really. In fact, he played 3 roles in the show. If you look, he also plays the Dream Spider, apparently.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he's credited. I'm sure he made sure he got credit for that.
Okay.
And that's funny because in theater, he's known for doing that kind of thing where it was like, oh, you need this prop moved in the background or a puppet or something. He'd jump in and do those things, even though he was the star of the show. So it's right on brand for him to have been the Dream Fighter.
Right.
But yeah, I really had a fun time doing this. And then I have myself been in a musical version of Jekyll and Hyde.
Okay.
That was set more modern day and involved putting computer chips in brains instead of just a solution. But, same basic plot. And it was really neat to kind of see the roots of where we came from.
The Jekyll and Hyde story. How familiar are you with Jekyll and Hyde? Pretty
familiar. I've done a lot of research into the different Victorian era stories like that. So pretty familiar.
I read the original novel probably in junior high school. Picked it up during one of those book fairs, and I picked up that and The War of the Worlds.
Oh, wow, what a combo.
Yeah, so I read it then, but I've not read it since, but I've seen plenty of versions of the story.
Sure, there are lots.
I mean, Hammer Films did it a few times, at least twice, I believe. And then, I mean, even as silly as like The Nutty Professor or Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, and which was the Hammer film. But then they did the one with Sean Young and the dude from Wings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the only thing I remember
I've seen that one, but I know which one you're talking about.
The only thing I remember about that is like Jekyll's friend saying scars. Chicks dig guys with scars. That's all I remember from that. In The Nutty Professor, the original, and the remake with Eddie Murphy. So you've got this cultural presence, Jekyll and Hyde. It's a well-known story. And
it is a story that bridges time periods. You can move it around and set it in different time periods. And because human beings inherently have vices, you can just match the vices to that. For instance, in the theater show I was in, because it was set more modern day, one of Jekyll's vices was he liked to go to strip clubs.
Yeah. Because
that was a modern day vice, whereas in our 1920 silent film, he's going to opium dens, he's doing other things that are time appropriate. If he'd been in the U.S., he probably would have been, drinking because of prohibition and stuff.
Oh, but, good. That's a good point.
It can be set wherever, whenever you want, because it's really about the inherent human nature and how nobody is all good, nobody is all evil. You can't separate those things out of yourself, because how do you know the good if you've never seen the bad?
Right. I mean, you just described that Star Trek episode where Kirk gets split into good and bad. So yeah, it's really neat. And now I kind of want to see a Jekyll and Hyde set in Prohibition America. That sounds awesome.
And he's like a bootlegger.
Yes.
That's his science. He's trying to get the bootlegging right, but then he accidentally invents juice or whatever.
Hyde juice.
Okay.
I like it.
Let's write it. I think we can do it.
Yeah, there's as if I don't have enough to write. But that sounds awesome. So this particular version of the story of the film, like a lot of our classic films, classic horror movies, the ones that we hold up, Frankenstein, Dracula, whatever, they're not based on the original novel. They're based on a stage play, which was based on the original novel.
And
So
here again.
yeah, so in this one was based on a stage play which was written by Thomas Russell Sullivan. It was an 1887 stage production, and I don't know much about the guy. I don't know much about the play. I would love to get my hands on it to read.
He has a fantastic mustache.
He does have a fantastic mustache if you look him up on Wikipedia. But yeah, so this is based on a play, and the play did add some things that the novel didn't have, including the leading lady. The main female character.
Well, if you're going to do a movie in Hollywood, you have to have a love interest.
If you're doing a movie with a Barrymore,
with a Barrymore, exactly. Yeah, you know.
So we end up with a woman in the cast as well, in a pretty significant role, which is very different than what we had in the original novel. There is no Millicent Carew character in the novel. And she was played by Martha Mansfield. And what I found really interesting, speaking of women being present in the production, this particular film was written by a woman.
It was by Clara Barringer, who also sometimes went by Charles Barringer for obvious time period reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, how neat to have a well-educated woman writer. You know, she was someone who graduated from university in 1907, so she was well established by this time and had done quite a bit of writing as her alter, pen name or whatever you want, nom de plume. But then I think it's nice that eventually she could come out of the dark, and we can acknowledge, especially in this day and age, that, hey, some of these great stories, they came from women. I mean, look at Frankenstein.
Right.
We would have no Frankenstein if it weren't for women. And I think, you get the woman added into the story here. I think having a female writer gives you a different perspective on things.
It does. And I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of early Hollywood was shaped and formed by women. That there are a number of unsung heroes of the female persuasion in early Hollywood that, because it was viewed upon as kind of like a dirty kind of secret kind of whatever, claptrap kind of entertainment, the big name writers wouldn't go work there. They'd stay on the stage or write for Broadway. Why would we write for film?
It wasn't considered high class. It was
Right.
considered, low class.
Well, you have in writing, editing, lots of women involved. That man.
You also have the time period, though, being in the first half of the 20th century. This movie comes out in 1920, right?
Yes.
So what was happening for the 6 years before that?
Before 1920?
Yeah.
What's that?
World War I.
Yeah.
And you got a lot of men that are away. When you see the next big jump, then we see, jumps in technology and in movies and stuff. And we get another big push when World War II comes in with a lot more women in the industry, because there were roles to fill and they stepped up and big time and filled them, with some pretty big shoes, I would say.
Yeah.
And so, it is neat to see how even in early Hollywood, women were there and they had a guiding hand in things, and they were contributing artistically to our American culture.
It's really interesting to me, and I want to know more about her now, because I just stumbled across a quote from an interview that she gave to Luella Parson in 1922. Luella Parson was involved in a lot of early, I hate to say gossip writing, but it was that kind of writing,
Okay.
For the Hollywood, for the picture industry, the motion picture industry. I'll be out in California when Mr. DeMille begins operations. Under my old contract, I furnished 8 continuities a year. She wrote 8 silent films a year.
That's incredible.
When she started working with William DeMille, she only had to write 4, but 4 films a year.
But did you work with Mr. DeMille?
This isn't Cecil B. DeMille. This is Wade DeMille. This predates that.
Oh, wow. This is even before that.
Yeah. That's crazy to me. And I know writing a silent film is going to be a little bit different than what we associate with screenwriting today, but still.
But I can understand her excitement. If you get to cut your workload in half, that means the level of work you're going to be able to do on those remaining scripts is just going to be so much higher of a level.
Yeah.
To already be on contract with studios in 1920 as a woman writer, that's
How cool is that?
That's pretty impressive.
That's really
That is
impressive.
pretty impressive.
And it's well written. The movie moves along really well. I think it aged really well.
Yeah.
The movie itself, I really like the production of it. The shadows and lighting and cinematography is very well done. You can definitely see some of that, I want to say German influence maybe in this. That kind of
So,
It's not as stark as say like Nosferatu or The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, but it's still there. There's an expressionism at play here. And especially when you've got Hyde running around doing stuff with the prosthetics, the early prosthetics
yeah.
and the early makeup.
Yes.
The lighting really helps out too. Do you want to say anything else about the movie before we talk about where we saw it?
It just, that I was impressed with the effects for the time. I'm not sure if there's a name for that sort of fade through from one character to the next, but
Kind of like a lap dissolve that you would see like in the Wolfman, but a little bit more.
but it's an earlier version,
Yeah.
clearly of that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't bad.
No.
It didn't break. It in no way broke the feeling or the emotion of the movie. It kept it going right along, and boy, whoever came up with that, two big thumbs up, because it really worked well. And that was kind of the one thing going in. I was worried that it was just going to be a cheesy cut from one face directly to the other. And they clearly took a lot of time and effort and a lot of shots
Yeah.
in between stages of makeup and things, to get those shots. And I appreciate that.
That, yeah, is definitely a testament to the whoever did the special effects on that. The director was John S. Robertson, and I'm looking at his filmography, and there's a lot on here that I'd like to track down and check out. Just in terms of his output, he worked into the sounds, into the talkies.
Oh, Wednesday's Child. That's a good.
Yeah, so he worked into the 30s. The Crime Doctor I've heard of. Oh, he did a version of Little Orphan Annie. How cool is that? So yeah, there's a number of movies that he had done silent era as well as talkies. Cool to see that he made that transition.
Yeah, because not everybody did.
Yeah.
As we've learned in Singing in the Rain, not everyone is cut out for the talkies.
And now that song is stuck in my head. Okay, anyway.
Oh, I thought you meant Good Morning.
Well, now that one's stuck in my head.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk about where we saw it, because, oh my goodness, what an introduction to movies here in Phoenix. What a magnificent movie palace.
It was the Orpheum Theatre in Phoenix. It is a 95-year-old movie palace, seats over 1,300 people, 2 balconies.
Mm-hmm.
It is huge. It is gorgeous. And I did talk a little bit about it at the beginning of this episode in the introduction that I'm doing these days on the podcast, but it is an amazing place, recently renovated.
A lot of new paint job, a lot of is the seating new, I think.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, new seating, which was comfortable. The bathrooms were nicely appointed. I don't know if you used the men's restroom at all, but the ladies' room was nice. They have a decent choice of snacks and things, I thought.
I thought that was cool. The snack bar is in the basement. It's on the bottom floor. And they had boxes of popcorn, not bags of popcorn, but boxes of popcorn. You could have also ordered like a meat and cheese tray and things like that.
They had some different
Yeah.
tapas type choices and things, as well as the traditional popcorn. But really, the thing that just blew me away is when you step inside the theater. The columns holding things up, supports, the gilding just everywhere. There's so much gilding. And then the magnificent ceiling that just comes to life.
The ceiling was amazing. I felt like I was in the Mexican restaurant in Epcot. The way the ceiling was kind of painted a little, or some of the ceilings that you see in various shopping malls in Las Vegas.
Yes, but I meant more the effects of it.
Yeah.
That you had clouds going by. It changed as we got closer to the movie. It changed into more of a night sky to accommodate, being darker so that the movie could play. And anytime you got at all, I won't say bored, but needed a moment away from the screen, you could look at that ceiling and be completely entertained just as well. So I just was really impressed with the whole place. They've clearly put a ton of time and attention and detail into the renovations. The staircase alone had to have taken hundreds of hours
Yeah.
to replaster and fix up this beautiful spiraling staircase.
I mean, the theater has its own listing on Wikipedia. That should tell you that it's something special, right? Because only the most important stuff's on Wikipedia.
Sure. Why are you?
No.
Oh.
I've tried, but they keep deleting my
But
post.
they do lots of special events there at the Orpheum. I know we're looking at for someone's upcoming birthday here, going to see Psycho.
That's right. They are showing Psycho on December 11th, which is actually my birthday. Also the date on which the events of Psycho begins is on December 11th. And it starts in Arizona.
What a nice birthday claim. But yes, so they do all kinds of different movie events, not just silent films. I believe when I went on their site, you can also contact them about rentals for special events.
Yeah, and they do a lot of music and comedy and other live entertainment as well. And speaking of live entertainment, we totally glossed over this.
Oh.
There was a musical accompaniment.
There was, which you're right. We should have talked a little bit more about that we had live musical accompaniment. And how neat is that? I can't tell you the last time I went to a movie that had live musical accompaniment. Actually, I think I can. I think I was about 8 at an organ grinder pizza place with the giant pipe organ and some cheesy cartoon movie playing on the screen. Not quite the same experience as this.
That is so cool, though. So this was the Mysterium Quartet, which had 5 people on stage, which really confused us.
I think one was running the tech stuff, though.
Right.
Yeah, but
yeah, and he was there with the rest of the quartet, the rest of the band, and they were up on stage where I would assume the musicians would set up for, their
kind of below where the screen.
But the screen would drop.
Yes.
Between them and us.
But you could see the shadow of them sometimes.
Every once in a while you can see their shadow.
Kind of
yeah.
Neat. And their take on it and their use of what would maybe be considered non-traditional instruments for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed.
What non-traditional sounds did you pick up on? There's a lot of, I felt like beating heart stuff and things like that.
Well, I mean, the percussionist had some different everyday items that they were using to create like the beating heart and stuff. But then in the instrumentation, at one point, somebody had a theremin up there and was doing creepy, very appropriate, right?
Heck yeah.
Was it a trumpet the one guy had? At one point, I was like, a trumpet, but they made it work, And then there was a keyboard, I believe, also that did quite a bit, both in piano mode, but also, I suspect, changing to different instrumentations.
Yeah, synthesizer mode.
They were clearly having a fantastic time doing it. And there's something about watching people perform who not only do a good job, but are genuinely enjoying themselves that just makes the experience that much better and so memorable.
It was a lot of fun, and huge thanks to the friends of the Orpheum Theatre for this amazing screening experience. And we are going to go back to the Orpheum. Not just for my birthday, by the way. If you're in the area, come join us.
Popcorn. No, kidding.
No, it was a lot of fun. We're going to go back for other things too. They were showing other silent films. We've already missed it, but they were showing the original The Sheik.
Oh, yeah.
Which would have been amazing to see with a live accompaniment. I've seen a few movies with a live accompaniment. I've seen Nosferatu with a live performance and a few other things when we lived in the Pacific Northwest. And seeing it here in a proper movie palace, look,
it transports you back.
It really does. I love other theater experiences. And if you go back to the archives of Monster Kid Radio, you'll hear us gush about some of our other favorite movie theaters in the Pacific Northwest. But this one is right up near the top as well. This
Definitely.
was very, very cool. And I recommend seeing this movie, even if you think you've already seen it or you're overly familiar with Jekyll or Jekyll and Hyde. Check this out. Watch the silent film. It's in the public domain, which means it's all over the place. And you know what? I might even do a Jekyll and Hyde themed loop on the Twitch stream in the near future. I'll include this silent film. I don't know what accompaniment we'll have with it, but I'll include the silent film and a few other things that I found over the years online pertaining to Jekyll and Hyde.
Well, fantastic.
That brings us to the end of this episode of The Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you for reviewing this podcast wherever it is you download your podcast. Please enter reviews, any shares, any retweets or re-X's, what do they call it now on X? Whatever it is you do to help promote the show, review it, share it with your friends. We appreciate that here. Thank you for doing that. If you want to know more about what we're doing here at the podcast, check us out at monsterkidradio.net. We're going to have links to everything that we've talked about here on the show. You're going to find links to the Hydrotonics. You're going to find links to our Amazon affiliate page where you can buy anything you need to buy on Amazon. If you got to shop through Amazon, please use that affiliate button because we get like a penny or two off the top. And, it helps us out, doesn't cost you anything extra, and it's just another way you can help contribute to the success of your podcast. So thank you if you're already doing that. Thank you if you're going to do that, especially with the holiday season upon us. We just appreciate all the help you can give us. So Beth did mention that on December 11th, we are doing something, and I think I mentioned it too. We are going back to the Orpheum Theatre to see the original Psycho.
This is Alfred Hitchcock. The scream you have just heard was not mine, but was rather from one of the scenes of a motion picture called Psycho. That scream, although it sounds identical to the one you previously heard, is one of many you will probably hear during the viewing of Psycho, possibly even coming from your own throat. The reason for this is that Psycho is now being released the way I originally made it, with every scene intact, especially the famous shower bath scene the TV version didn't dare show. That was no one in particular, just a mild warning that no one will be admitted except at the very beginning of Psycho.
Suggested for mature audiences.
I'm ecstatic for this one because I haven't seen Psycho since the last time I saw it in a theater up in Portland, Oregon, and then I did a podcast about it with Chris McMillan many moons ago when the world was young and dinosaurs roamed the earth, or at least sometime within the past decade. I talked about it here on the show. I haven't talked about it since. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I would love for you to join us. If you are in the Phoenix area, please join us at the Orpheum Theatre to check out Psycho on December 11th. You can find out more about the Orpheum Theatre at orpheumphx.com. Link in the show notes. And there's even an event page set up by the Orpheum on Facebook. Let them know that you're coming. Let me know that you're coming. I would love to meet you and hang out with you. And, it's a whole different crop of monster kids down here in the Phoenix area. So if you're down here, I'd love to meet you. Really. And I know Beth would love to meet you too. It'll be a lot of fun to see Psycho at the Orpheum. Trust me, the Orpheum is a gorgeous theater. I can't think of a better theater to see this movie in on my birthday. It's going to be a real treat. Speaking of future plans, let's talk about next week. We're going to watch a movie that is absolutely nothing like Psycho. Did you know that up until recently, my beautiful bride Beth had never seen the original Godzilla? Well, we corrected that. So that's what's coming up next week on the show. We're going to revisit Godzilla. Well, I am. Beth is going to visit Godzilla for the very first time. So that's coming up next week on the show. Stay tuned for that. That'll be coming out next Monday. And depending on when you're listening to this, it may have already come out. So make sure you check out the archives at monsterkidradio.net. We do have a Reddit, we do have a Discord, and most importantly, we do have a Patreon. I mentioned this a little bit last week. We're going to try to do more with the Patreon page. We're going to completely redo and probably get rid of all the different reward levels because honestly, I'm not very good at keeping up with those. And we're going to introduce a new reward level where you get to a monthly video vlog from Monster Kid Radio. We're calling it the House of Monster Kid Radio. And the December House of Monster Kid Radio will be open to everybody. So you don't have to be a patron to enjoy that video. Just make sure you follow the page over at patreon.com/monsterkidradio so you get updated when that video goes live. And then starting in January, it'll be patrons only. You need to be a $5 and up patron, and you'll get the House of Monster Kid Radio video vlog. It will include just updates about what's going on here at Monster Kid Radio and Team Death. It'll include maybe even movie reviews or commentary. We're not really sure yet, but it's going to be a lot of fun because really, how can you not have fun when it comes to monsters? Bride of Monster Kid Radio is a Team Death production. All original content of Bride of Monster Kid Radio is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 Unported license. You can learn more about Team Death, our other projects like Death Designs, Mail Order Zombie, the Team Death YouTube channel, and more at www.teamdeath.com. Remember, death is spelled D-E-T-H. All previous episodes of this podcast, as well as the original Monster Kid Radio podcast, are available at www.monsterkidradio.net. Please rate and review Bride of Monster Kid Radio wherever you download your favorite podcasts. Gin and Hydrotonics is copyright 2024 by the Hydrotonics. Big thanks to the Hydrotonics for letting us play their music here on the show. Please check them out at thehydrotonics.bandcamp.com and check out their entire album, Octoloco, and let them know that you heard about them here on The Bride of Monster Kid Radio. My name's Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week. Ciao.